more, again, compared to what? If you want to compare a central plan in, say, North Korea versus the many plans in South Korea, if you want to compare the central plan in, I don't know, Taiwan versus China versus Venezuela versus Costa Rica, Chile versus what has been Argentina up until last week.
Okay, so this is an article from BBC. I want you to see this, right? This is an article from BBC. And I'm showing you the headline of the article, right? It's called North Korea Struggles to Control the Changing Economy. But I just wanted to show you the article where it came from. But now I'm going to show you what a section from the article I would like you to take note of, right? This is BBC. This is not communist news. This is not, state media from North Korea. This is BBC.
State media from Britain. Okay.
Britain, who is their enemy, right? I mean, not a big fan of North Korea. Economic miracle. At one time, North Korea's centrally planned economy seemed to work well. Indeed, in the initial years of the creation of North Korea, mass mobilization of the population with Soviet and Chinese technical assistance and financial aid resulted in an annual growth rate estimated to have reached 20%, even 30% in the years following the Korean War. As late as the 1970s, South Korea languished in the shadow of the economic miracle north of the border. That's BBC, right? When the Soviet Union existed, when they weren't isolated, when they weren't, completely locked out as they were in the 90s, the North Korean economy was actually doing quite well. The food crisis and all that came in the 90s when they couldn't get access to petroleum, when their major trading partner was destroyed. Also, you mentioned South Korea. South Korea has a largely state-run economy even today, but especially in the 70s under Park Chung-hee, it was like the military was running the economy. POSCO, their steel industry, was created by the government. The car manufacturers were created by the government. It was a largely state-run economy. So South Korea's economy, where you had this kind of Bonapartist military authoritarian state backed up by the United States that murdered leftists and tortured people and had prison camps, they still had a huge amount of state control over the economy. So South Korea is not an argument for free market economics at all.
Well, I would disagree. I mean, North Korea has a per capita GDP of $800.
Now,
the world right now.
But South Korea, the
South
boom
Korea
in South Korea is largely the result of state control, right? I mean, POSCO, the steel industry,
which one had more
state control?
Government. Which one had more state control, North Korea or South Korea?
At this point, North Korea obviously has more state control, and you'll see that in the 70s until the 1970s, their economy was doing quite well. I just read you, BBC said they were languishing in the shadow of the economic miracle in the North until the 70s and 80s. In the 50s and 60s, their economy was doing very, very well, according to the BBC.
Yeah, but there was no miracle. It was. I mean, if it evaporates to $800 per capita.
Yeah,
that's not a miracle. It evaporates. If it's gone.
That's later, though. That's after the Soviet Union falls, after the USA piles all kinds of sanctions on them, after they cannot import petroleum. You know how vital oil is in our modern economy. They couldn't import any of it. They had a food crisis imposed on them by the West. They're completely locked out of the world economy, right? And as a result of that, things were very bad in the 90s. They called it the arduous march, but it wasn't like that before. They were actually quite prosperous until the fall of the Soviet Union. And that's a fact. And South Korea is the result of a huge amount of state central planning and state intervention also. So that argument is just
again compared to what?
Comparing North and South Korea, I mean,
do well. And if
both of them
had
a huge amount of state involvement in the economy. Both of them had huge amounts of state involvement. Park Chung-hee was, he was setting up corporations. The USA was forcing Japan to lend money to him. The military was running things. It was not a free market economy in any capacity. None of the Asian tiger countries are. And this is a really common thing. Milton Friedman does this.
Any of the data. It's
Milton
not based
Friedman
on any
does this, and
say,
Hong Kong
doing really well
not a free
Costa
marketplace.
Rica.
A huge amount, Singapore, there's a huge amount of government involvement in the economy. Taiwan in the 80s, a huge amount of government involvement in the economy.
Most of it's not socialist.
Well, it's not socialist, yes, but it's Bonapartism, it's military control.
Isn't your argument that socialism is better? And when there's
my
no
argument
socialism, how does it do?
That you need state central planning, and that these countries, the Asian tigers, were allowed to develop with state central planning for capitalism, much like Saudi Arabia, much like Singapore, Taiwan. They were able to use central planning because the USA needed them as a buffer against China and against the Soviet Union. And the United States pulled out all of its money. Remember the crash of the Asian markets in the late 1990s, right? They pulled out all of their money and wrecked them. And that, Lee Kuan Yew was fighting with the Clinton administration, and Park Chung-hee was probably killed by the United States, right? I mean, it looks like that because he wanted South Korea to have their own nuclear weapons.